and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and happy Eve of Christmas Eve, something like that. Alejandro Rojas will be coming up with the news in a few minutes. But before that, just a reiteration, we are live on Podcast UFO. We have a player right on the sidebar, and a few people may be listening over at the Dark Matter Digital Network, but that would be a old pre-recorded rerun. And so we are going to be on the Podcast UFO live every week, same time as always. And tonight's guest, we have two people on. We have Stan Gordon on and John Ventre, and they're both going to have sort of a point-counterpoint on what the Kecksburg may or may not have been, whether it was a GE Mark II re-entry vehicle or something else. It's, I would say, kind of a debate. We'll see what happens. And that'll be for the first hour. In the second hour, it's just going to be Stan Gordon. We're going to be talking about what's going on in the Keystone State in Pennsylvania. He's a great researcher, so it should be very interesting. So, again, the shows are always going to be here on Podcast UFO, Wednesdays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And come over to the chat room and chime in. We also have a phone line that is 603-967-4030 for anyone that wants to call in. And I guess that's about it. I want to say if you celebrate Christmas, I hope you have a wonderful Christmas and happy holidays to all of you out there. And here we go. How are you, Alejandro?
Good. How are you doing?
Great. Good to have you on, sir.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, I got a little frog kind of in my throat there for a second.
I thought that was a frog or alien or something.
Yeah, something freaky going on. But it's all cleared out now, and so I'm much better, and I'm ready to go. How are you doing?
Doing great. I am doing great. Getting ready for Christmas, only a day or so away. And,
wow.
Hasn't it come up fast this year?
It has come up extremely fast, and it's going to be gone before you know it. It's going to seem like probably 45 minutes between now and the time that we're doing this again next week.
That's right. And then New Year.
Yeah. Wow.
Yep. New Year is, I found out, being in Russia this year, that New Year is celebrated greatly in Russia. Not that I was there during New Year, but there was some talk about that Christmas is no big deal, but New Year is a real big deal.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, if you mess up celebrating New Year, there's a saying they have in Russia, and that is, whatever you're doing on New Year's Eve is going to shape the whole year ahead.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was throw American man off cliff.
Oh, no, that's only some of them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So what's going down for the UFO news?
Lots of stuff going on, and this first one reminds me of some, news about the UFO Congress, and that is why, if it's okay if I share that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is a Christmas tree UFO sighting, and this reminds me of some of the big news we were talking about that I couldn't release on your show last week. I think that's what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Our last speaker, and this is exciting because these guys have been guests on your show, but our exciting announcement, which I haven't even put online, so it's only been on my show and your show that I've even told people about this, but it will be Doug Trumbull and Mark D'Antonio coming to speak at the UFO Congress. Wow. And why is that exciting? Yeah. Well, because Doug Trumbull is a special effects guru who did the special effects for my, top favorite movies in the whole world, like Close Encounters, 2001, Blade Runner, and speaking of Close Encounters, that UFO at the end of it is often referred to as a Christmas tree UFO, and that's similar to the first story I'm going to talk about in a minute here.
Well, I actually watched Close Encounters the other night after you and I had a conversation about, you were wondering why I hadn't watched it.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, it really is a great movie. It's timeless.
I know,
would say.
Isn't it? It is timeless. It's amazing.
Yeah, and then actually to see J. Allen Hynek, I never knew that he was actually had an appearance, a walk-on.
Oh, you didn't?
Nope. And then
seen my lecture on that.
Okay, then the French character that I guess is supposed to be Jacques Vallée?
Exactly, Jacques Vallée, who's going to be at the conference. And it turns out that Jacques Vallée and Doug Trumbull are friends. So they've been talking and both excited to see each other at the conference.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Are we going to do a round table or something at the end like you did last year?
Yeah, we will. However, I'm not sure if either of those guys will be able to join it. We'll see. But that reminds me of, since you mentioned it, J. Allen Hynek, Frank Warren, he runs UFOchronicles.com, another UFO website. And I just found it because I remembered this. Just like about a month ago, he sent out a picture. It was a Christmas card with J. Allen Hynek in it, and he's kind of getting taken away by aliens in a UFO. But it was a Christmas card that Frank Warren, I don't know how he got it. He said Henry McKay gave it to him, but it's pretty funny. The caption reads, "We did it. We caught Santa Claus," because really referring to Hynek's white beard and everything. That is a little Santa Claus-ish.
Yeah.
Like you saw in the movie.
Right. So, did I interrupt you in that story about the Christmas tree? Or
No, I mentioned that exciting piece of news, and then we'll get into the Christmas tree. And you've had him on the show, right?
Yes, Doug Trumbull has been on with Mark. It was a great show.
Talking about UFO-TOG, and that's what they'll be talking about. And I'm sure you probably had Mark on several times.
Yeah, Mark's been on a number of times. I was at his place a little while ago.
That's
Did a
right.
show from there. Yeah.
How cool.
He is an awesome guy.
Yeah, I got to see you guys like FaceTime or something like that.
Right. Yeah, that's right. You did join
via video.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Awesome. Yeah, so this first story is about a Christmas tree, and now that I think about it, it might have been the E.T. UFO that was referred to the Christmas tree. But I guess they both look similar, the E.T. UFO and the Close Encounters one. They're both huge. Steven Spielberg, too.
Right.
So that brings me to the story about the UFOs shaped like Christmas trees. So this is an interesting case. This was in Tennessee, Bluff City. It took place on December 10th, 2015. It was about 6 p.m. When someone was driving. They were a passenger in a vehicle when they saw these couple of odd objects. He said that they flew in sets of two, that they traveled side by side, and they resembled Christmas trees and were flashing, and they were in the sky and did not have the mountains or trees as their background, they said. Each one was not quite the same color. They appeared orangish red. One was blue and white. Wow. The witness says, we knew they were either suppressed government technology or alien in origin. So they also said there was a helicopter scene with a spotlight that came through the area. There weren't any photos or videos, but this one's being investigated by Tennessee MUFON.
Did the first one have like a red light, like a red nose reindeer? No.
Christmas trees, not reindeer.
Oh, all right, I know, but you said sets of two, so anyway.
Yeah, that was cute. I get it, where you're headed there.
Okay.
But yeah, they said the incident lasted about 20, 30 minutes. And so it's just an anecdotal report and kind of interesting. I mean, it raises a little bit of a red flag where they're like, it was so spectacular, sets of two, and then a helicopter comes flying in. But I guess you never know. We'll have to see what Tennessee MUFON finds out if they go and interview this gentleman.
Right. Yeah. Well, it would be kind of hard to make up something like that. So it would be interesting to find out how that all pans out, or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it is Christmas, so Christmas
right.
tree flying saucers, flying Christmas trees.
It must have been beautiful, actually.
Yeah. So a few days later, another story, this one also written by Roger from the Mutual UFO Network, from their case files, this sighting was a few days later, and there was a video on this one. This is December 13th, 2015. This was at 5:43 p.m., and as you can see in the video, it's very dark. And in the video, you see what this person describes, which is 3 lights in a triangular formation. This person felt this was a triangular, low-flying triangular U-shaped UFO. And I don't know, it's hard to say. From the video alone, it looks like it could be an airplane, but the witness describes that he felt that it wasn't, that it looked triangular. So it's another one of those things that's, hard to say. So they said that it did go over their car, and they felt it was about 50 feet above the car. And then it sped up at an incredible speed and took off very quickly.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's always hard to say with these because they said they were in a car, so it could be a plane that they mistaken, and, it just perceived, it was all perception, the movement of the craft, or it could have been something genuinely mysterious. Hard to say.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty cool. Well, Alejandro, this is it's been a real good year with you, and next week you and I and Lee Spiegel. You want to talk about that?
Oh, yeah, next week. So we'll do an end-of-a-year review. So you and I and Mr. Lee Spiegel, who's, of course, doing news for the mainstream media on a regular basis on UFOs, we'll talk about the year in review, or we'll talk about, I guess, some best cases of the year. So be sure to look through those 2015 cases and be prepared to talk about your favorite. I think what we usually do is kind of a round-robin type of thing where we go, okay, Martin, it's your turn. What's your next top case? And then you can talk about it. And then we go to Lee. And what we found in the past, and you'll probably be similar as well, is that often many of the same cases, we choose many of the same cases. Although sometimes, Lee will come up with a weird one where I'll be like, what? That's one of your favorites?
So does this mean I'm going to have to do...
we argue about it.
I'm going to have to do homework.
You have to do a little bit of homework, yeah.
Wow.
Brainstorm. And, it is good to look over, because every year I look over the stories from the previous year, and I forget how many great stories there were.
Uh-huh.
And so, and it helps me remember some of the great stories, because we cover these stories so often that often there'll be a good one, and we talk about it, and you and I talk about how great it was, and then we forget about it. And until we review it, we forget about these great cases.
Huh. That's right. Wow. I'm really looking forward to that. And there'll be a link on this website on Podcast UFO once that show goes live.
And it's actually going to be a week and a half away. Of course, we're going to record it before New Year's.
I see.
I'll be going to Denver then. So it'll be not this Monday, but the following Monday that we'll post that.
Uh-huh. All right. Well, excellent. Well, thanks so much, Alejandro. And thanks for all your hard work this year. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me, my friend.
Actually, I'll be probably talking to you next week or not on this show. Are you you're going to be off in Denver or something, aren't you?
Oh, well, I will be around next Wednesday, so I can be on the show. And then you and I will talk on my podcast on Monday, hopefully. I've got David Marler to talk about the Farmington, New Mexico UFO sighting. So it's
great.
A really exciting one.
That's going to be a great show. All right, Alejandro, you have a good one.
You too. Talk to you soon.
All right, hang on, everyone. We'll be right back with Stan Gordon and John Ventre right after this music break. Hello, Stan Gordon and John Ventre. How are you guys doing?
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, very good, thanks.
I just learned tonight as I talked to you both, you guys live in the same town. How about that in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, that's unbelievable. We live about 3 miles apart, and I think Stan was the MUFON state director 3 different times for about 20 years. I've been the state director for 9 or 10 years now, and nearly all of our state directors have come out of Western PA.
Oh, wow. One thing I want to say, there was someone trying to call during the news, and two different people were trying to call in, and that number is 603-967-4030. And you're welcome to call in a little bit later as we get along in the conversation. But anyway, now, John, you were on with Owen Eichler back, I think it was 3 weeks ago, wasn't it? Something like that?
Yeah, approximately.
And you had discussed, along with Owen, and many reasons why you both were thinking was the GE Mark II reentry vehicle. And I did get some information from a senior engineer that raised some questions. But Stan, I'm going to let you come in and bring up some points that you want to discuss about some conflicting thoughts on this situation. So go ahead, if you would, Stan.
Well, I'm not sure how many of your listeners are really familiar with the case. Do you want me to just give a really brief summary of the case for people who are listening?
Yeah, listeners that listened to 3 weeks ago, if you can do just a quick nutshell case on how that happened.
Okay, well, just very briefly, 4:47 p.m., the object is seen in the greater Pittsburgh area. It was initially reported seeing this brilliant fiery object from the tip of Ontario, Canada, over Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And it was observed by a multitude of witnesses coming in over Pittsburgh and moving out into Westmoreland County. And as the reports were coming in, some people thought it was an aircraft that was on fire. So what happened was this object fell in a wooded ravine outside the little community of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, in Mount Pleasant Township, Westmoreland County. And what I found out during my 50 years of research on the case was that soon after it fell, some of the local people went down into the woods and came across this object. And then later, volunteer firemen, the Kecksburg firemen, because of reports coming in, they set up a search for a possible downed aircraft in the Kecksburg area. And various mutual aid fire departments responded to the incident. And one of those volunteer firemen was Jim Romansky. Jim Romansky was not from Kecksburg. He was from one of the volunteer fire companies, a small company outside of Lake Trobe, PA. And when they got to the scene, they described setting up this, they were going to set up a grid search to search this large wooded area for what they thought was a possible downed aircraft. And Jim recalled, now I didn't meet Jim until 1987, just by sheer luck being in the right place at the right time, and we can talk about that as well. But anyhow, Jim was with these other volunteer firemen looking for a possible downed aircraft. He remembered how the various firemen were loaded into various trucks along the field, and they were going to walk up into this large wooded area, and they had walkie-talkies with them. And Jim told me, he said they were up in the area, and they weren't up that long when they heard a radio call from one of the other teams that they had found the crash site. So he hurried over with the small group was with him, and there were several firemen on this little embankment, and they were standing there looking at this, what Jim called this huge acorn, that was only a few feet away from them. I mean, it was close enough they could have walked over and touched it. They were walking around looking at it. He said, to the best visibility, he would say he would estimate the way it was sticking out of the ground, he would estimate this thing was at least 10 to 12 feet or more in length, about 8 to 10 feet or more in diameter. He said a grown man could have easily stood up inside of the device and moved around inside of it. Now, the interesting thing is that Jim worked most of his life as a machinist and was very familiar with metals. And what he told me for years, from the time I met him, was he said when he looked at this object, It gave him the impression that it was formed by pouring liquid metal into an acorn-shaped mold. He did not see any seams or rivet marks where it was joined together. It was just one big solid piece of metal. And on that raised up part of an acorn, it would have, he said that's what he called the bumper area. And he said it was on that part of the object that he saw what appeared to be symbols. And he recalled a number of different symbols from his memory best he could. Some were like zigzag lines, other type of broken lines, stars, circles, some other configurations. And, I mean, he was so intrigued by this that after it happened for years, he went to libraries and read books trying to look at ancient languages that would be similar. And he said the closest thing he could find were ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. But also there was another interesting detail which was not very well known. Only certain witnesses who were in a position to see it, where it was unobstructed, they reported seeing what appeared to be a rounded protuberance on the front of the object as well. So one of the first things we got to deal with is the fact that what the eyewitnesses are describing does not appear to be the GE Mark II, what it looks like compared to what witnesses described.
All right, John, do you have anything to say to that?
Yeah, I got a couple of things to say about that. First of all, when he says that it's 8 to 10 feet high, 8 to 10 feet wide, I dispute that because it was put on the back of a flatbed. Flatbeds were actually 6 inches less narrow than today. So the flatbeds were 7.5 feet wide. And I've talked to witnesses in Kecksburg and asked, did anybody see this object overlapping the sides of the flatbed? Because obviously, if it was 8 to 10 feet, you'd have a couple of feet sticking off the sides of the flatbed. And they have said, no, it didn't stick off the sides. And as a matter of fact, there were witnesses, let me find it, who said that it was looked the size of 2 suitcases. Ernie Hoffman said it looked the size of 2 suitcases. So, and let me make another point on this, Stan. The replica that's at Kecksburg, how big is that one up on the stand? Is that 8 to 10 feet?
Yeah, I really have to look. I haven't looked at measurement up for years and years when they built that. But let me tell you an interesting couple things that I can answer. One, I don't know who you talked to, but I talked to numerous witnesses who saw the object on the flatbed, on the military flatbed truck, and they did distinctly tell me that, yes, it would overlap and hung off the side of the flatbed trailer. The second thing you brought up is, one, you mentioned about Ernie Hoffman. Something over the years when I worked on this case, there was a lot of little details that I was coming up with, having interviewed hundreds of witnesses, that I didn't make public for a long, long time until I had more confirmation. What confirmation I had is this. There was not one military flatbed tractor-trailer truck. There were actually 2. The one truck, what people saw was the lower flatter, covered cargo was on the one that went out earlier that evening, and I know it went to the air base in Pittsburgh. The one with the object on went out around 1 o'clock in the morning, and we have good confirmation that it went from Kecksburg to Lockbourne Air Force Base near Columbus, Ohio. It was there under very heavy security. I interviewed one of the Air Force security police officers, and he told me how they brought that in. And this is interesting because more than one person has confirmed to me how they brought it into the base. They used an entrance not normally used. They backed into a hangar. They set up a security perimeter around the hangar, and they were given a shoot-to-kill order to anybody approach that hangar without the proper authority. And so that's very interesting. But anyhow, and there was something else you brought up. Anyhow, I wanted to tell you a little story. Wait.
Don't get off this point yet, because I got a few more things to say about the size. One, I asked you in July, did it hang off the sides of the trailer, and you told me no. You were one of the people I asked. Now you're saying it did hang off the sides, so that doesn't jive.
When did you ask me that?
I asked you that right before the conference with all the witnesses. We were standing in the room.
That there were numerous witnesses who saw the fact that this thing hung over the side of the trailer. And
I dispute that point. But now, are you familiar with the picture from the Tribune Review that shows it laying on its side? I assume that's for the TV show Unsolved Mysteries. It's hanging up in the fire department. Are you familiar with that picture? It's in the UFO room.
yes.
And the lady that's standing there? Okay. Now, when you take that picture, and if that is the replica that's on the roof on the over there in Kecksburg, and if it's supposed to be 8 to 10 feet, that is laying on its side in a small ditch. I'm assuming the ditch was probably bigger than what you guys dug for the TV show. When you look at that, and you look at the picture of the GE Mark II, which was 6 feet by 6 feet, so you're saying this thing is 8 or 10 feet by 8 or 10 feet, and a woman is standing there, they look exactly the same on their side. You have to look at this picture because I put them side by side. They look exactly the same. And people's perception at night, because it's pitch black at this point, they're using flashlights, I assume, you're telling me that they can tell the difference between 6 feet and 8 feet when it's halfway buried in the ground. And I say that is nothing but human perception. And here's another point with Romansky, and I think this is really critical. His description of those symbols on the sides, he clearly said there was a 5-pointed star with a circle in the center, and an artist made a drawing rendition of Romansky's description of these symbols. The 5-pointed star with the circle in the center is absolutely 100% clearly an Air Force and Army symbol. You can look it up. That's what they use. That is a military symbol. And my other analogy is when we sent the Voyager space probe up and we put that gold plate on it to try to tell extraterrestrials where we're located in this universe, we showed our star as a little circle with straight rays of light coming from it. Why would an ET show a 5-pointed star with a circle in the center when that's our military symbol? So I think Romansky misidentified a lot of it.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm not saying it was extraterrestrial. I've said for years and years that there was a possibility this was a very advanced man-made space probe or possibly extraterrestrial. And there's a lot of information out there still, that I find very, very fascinating. But if John, if you look at the graphic that's on my website and you look at the symbols based on the best that Jim Romansky can remember years later of what some of the symbols look like, you see the star on it. Okay? Do you see a circle going around that star? And
No, there's an artist rendition out there that Romansky made with whoever this artist is. You can Google it. It's there. Matter of fact, if you just Google Kecksburg images, it's right there. It says artist rendition of what Romansky said, and you have it's actually more bullet pointed than acorn, the shape, and right on it in the center, 5-pointed star with a circle. And you even said a star with circles.
I didn't say star. I'm looking at that picture. It's on my website because I had that artist conception was done from the various symbols. So how do you explain all the other symbols in the row with that star? And, you tried to attribute the star, I believe, on a TV show recently in Pittsburgh, saying that it was an Air Force Air Force marking, and that no witness was ever reported like an Air Force emblem, what you're trying to describe. But also I wanted to tell you a story. I was out at the scene when Jim Romansky came up, when the Unsolved Mysteries was setting up the ground scene of the object. I do not recall if the actual object was made actually to the specification on side. I don't remember that, but I can tell you this. I was there when Jim came out and he saw the thing, and he started running towards it, and he had tears in his eyes. He was extremely emotional over it. He said, my God, it was like going back years ago. That was 1990. He saw it in 1965. But I remember him saying to me, he said, now that I'm standing next to this thing, he said, the actual object was longer, but the part in the back he called the bumper area where the symbols were, he said, weren't as wide as what he saw on the replica.
Yeah, but I can tell you, laying on its side in that picture that was used as the replica, it looks exactly like the Mark II that's in a holder in a picture of this Mark II. Obviously wasn't flown. It's one that wasn't flown. Laying on its side, they both look exactly the same. And we're talking about a difference of 2 feet in size, yet I think we proved with the flatbed it couldn't have been more than 7 feet. And the Mark II was 6 by 6, and I'm saying the flatbed is 7 feet, so the thing wasn't 8 to 10 feet.
Well, again, you got to remember they're describing something big enough for a full-size man to stand up inside of, to move around. You look at the GE Mark II, and remember again what he's describing. He's saying this looked like it was poured into a liquid metal to an acorn-shaped mold. It did not have any rivets or weld marks. You can see that on the GE Mark II. It did not, you didn't see the separation like going up to the back where it was one solid piece of metal where he saw the raised up symbols. And there were numerous projects of the Soviets, of the U.S., that you could call somewhat acorn-shaped. There were quite a lot of them out there. But because something is similar, that doesn't mean that's what it is.
Okay, let me just say one thing about the rivets and the seams. There's 2 pictures. One, the one I sent you originally, is in that in our document. It shows one sitting straight up. In that, you see a seam, right, with rivets, and then you see a little porthole window. That's where the camera system was taking pictures. But it only had one seam. They can't send something up in space that has multiple seams on it. There was one seam on it on one side near the window where the pictures were taken. Obviously, that was laying face down because it wasn't seen. The other picture that shows it in the holding rack, the one I was referring to when it's on its side, you see absolutely no seams on that. So it had one seam, and it was a 50-50 chance that seam was laying face down.
I would like, again, there were witnesses who saw this thing moving very low over their head before it fell. Let me tell you this, Ron. There are multitudes of witnesses out there who have never come forward. Many of these people I interviewed over the last 30, 40 years, many of them, unfortunately, are now deceased. But there's a lot more information out there that a lot of people are aware of. There are so many witnesses I talked to who confirm other people's accounts. And again, there were certain people who reported seeing what appeared to be a rounded, extended protuberance on the front of the object, which clearly is not on the GE Mark II, for example.
Right. I don't know what that is, but that's not, part of the shape or the replica that was made. Right. But the point that you, Owen, and I think are making here also is we need somebody that was on the scene military-wise to come forward. One of those 30 Army, Air Force, NASA people, or somebody in a control room somewhere that they were tracking this. We need somebody to come forward and say what they saw. Now, when you think of Roswell, there were military people came forward. Battle of L.A., military people. Rendlesham, military people on the scene have spoken up. But not on this case. We need somebody to come forward, and I think this is going to give the publicity out there that somebody's going to come forward. As a matter of fact, this one guy put some information out there that he was working at Johnson Island out in the Pacific, and Owen is trying to contact this guy. I think his last name was Lemon. But he said he worked out there at that time. That's what we need. We need somebody to come out and say, yeah, I was on the scene. I was one of the Army officers with a machine gun holding people back, and this is what it was. And we don't have that.
Right. Well, I can tell you this. Over the years, I talked to a number of independent sources who were in a position to know that said that the object was indeed being tracked, which is how they were able to get the teams get them out there, get them on alert, starting moving towards the general area, not knowing exactly where it was going to come down, but they knew the general area where it was going to happen. But, John, I've got a few questions for you that I'm looking through your report, and, there's a couple things I want to ask you about. One thing, kind of interesting, in the report it talks about the fact that the object was being controlled and it was avoiding populated centers, so it's coming from Canada over Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, but it comes right over the greater Pittsburgh area. Then it continues to move out over the city of Greensburg out in Westmoreland County, and then it proceeds out roughly towards Route 30 East, makes a turn to the south, and then it's seen by numerous people along those little farming communities out there, such as Marguerite and Norvelt. But then it continues through Kecksburg, passes very close to the area where it would later come down, but instead it continues out several miles to the mountains of Laurelville. Bill Bullybush was down in Mammoth, ran out on the road after he saw the object, and he said that it appeared to hesitate over the mountain. Then it changed direction, began to track back towards Kecksburg. There's witnesses all along that area. It made another turn, then dropped slowly down into that wooded ravine. And witnesses I interviewed said it came down almost like it made a controlled landing without any parachutes being reported. So that's one thing that's interesting because of the fact that there are apparently a number of different people now from the aerospace community who've been reading your report, and they're questioning the capability that the GE Mark II had in relation to the report. But something else I want to bring up, in the report, you talk about the fact that...
do you want me to comment? On that?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I just hold up 1 second before we move on to another topic? This is exactly the same topic as the NASA engineer wanted me to speak about. So don't go on to another topic. If you would, go ahead and respond to that.
Yeah. I mean, all of those turns that the GE Mark II could not come to a stop and then turn another direction. It was made to, it was maneuverable to what they describe as a precise point. But I'm not saying it could land in my yard if they wanted it to. It was maneuverable by shifting weight inside of it, and then what's called the Coander effect. It would kind of skim along the heavier atmosphere, and they could make a turn. Now, the interesting thing, there's a map out there, and the path of it, if it never turned, was exactly over Pittsburgh. And you can pull that map up out there. There's a red line showing its path, and it looks like it would have hit Pittsburgh if it didn't change. And right around Cleveland, it did bear to the right, and then it bared back to the left after it passed Pittsburgh and ended up in Kecksburg. It would have been able to do that and then slow down by skimming along the air surface, which is what it was made to do. And if they wanted it to land in the rural area, they could do that. It could not stop, come back, make left turns, right turns. It could make these minimal turns to avoid, let's say, a population center like Pittsburgh. That's what it was capable of doing.
All right. Now, if I just wanted to talk, this is a contact I had from someone that went over the information, and he's a high-level senior engineer at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, and he designed the cesium-ion engines for several space missions and has several instruments aboard the current MAVEN Mars orbital mission studying the atmospheres on the planet. And so he has all this background, and what his comment was, he said that the assertion that a re-entering satellite in a fireball plasma envelope could have received signals from the ground to change course is completely false because the plasma sheath generated by re-entry prevents it from receiving any signals. He said that even today we're absolutely out of contact with re-entering satellites and re-entry vehicles because of the plasma blackout. And his next comment was that even today re-entering vehicles do not maneuver because the energy requirements to do so during re-entry are far too great. That was the comments that he said.
Okay, well, I'd have to research that. I mean, I don't know anything about that other than the documents on this says that it was maneuverable to a precise location on Earth. I don't know if they make that maneuver at 50,000 feet or they make those maneuvers at 1,000 feet. But I'd have to research that because obviously I never heard that before.
Well, John, other than what Martin just said, there has been quite an interesting response from a number of people coming into different sources as well as on various blogs, people who are associated with the space community, aerospace field, who also have been reading the report, and they also have looked over this information, and they've come up with a lot of interesting details with the technical makeup of GE Mark II, which they believe does not explain what the Kecksburg object was. And there's a lot of information out there, and I'm not going to get into it all. I mean, there's a lot of it you'll probably be hearing about soon if you haven't already. I mean, I can bring up some of the points. Even Dave Rudiak was one of the gentlemen who brought some very interesting information up. In fact, he quoted and talked about an email he received from a retired NASA rocket scientist. And he said the GE Mark II nose cone was designed strictly for ICBMs for suborbital missions. Smaller Thor rocket of December 7, 65 test from Johnson Island could not attain orbital speeds. Suborbital missions only lasted a short time. GE carried only a 1-hour battery supply. It did not have the capability to become a stable orbiting satellite, much less a maneuvering object, even if it could survive reentry. That's just one of numerous inputs coming from people from the aerospace community who are looking into the data on the Mark II.
Okay, and I'll have to disagree with that because it says right here, Project 437 used stored missiles and added booster engines to achieve orbital flights. 18 more suborbital and orbital Thor launches took place from Johnson Island during the 1964 to 75 period. So they were orbital at that time, and they used booster rockets to do it. And the other thing, too, is there were numerous other launches out of Vandenberg that were orbital and suborbital, and those records are out there. And you also have to look at what about other programs, black projects, secret programs that they don't even list in these logs. These logs were kept secret until 1991. So, one of the points I want to make, too, because I know we're getting close to the first hour here, is, Stan, do you believe the Air Force story that it was a meteor?
Definitely not.
Okay. Do you believe the Air Force story that there were only 3 people there at the site?
Of course not. I've talked to multitudes of witnesses, including reporters, and there was quite an interesting response by the military, Army and Air Force. And
okay, no, I just wanted a yes or no answer because I'm trying to make a point. Now, you also agree with me, I hope, that Project Blue Book, which was in force at that time under the Constant Commission, was doing everything they can to debunk UFO cases, redact information out of reports and everything, and gave the most ridiculous answers like a meteor, right?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, so then why do we want, and this is, I almost find this comical when I have read those responses that are out there online, why do we believe the Air Force explanation, that it was suborbital, couldn't do this, couldn't do that? All they would have to do, and they kept this quiet for 26 years, 25 years, till 1991, if this was the Mark II, and they wanted to cover it up, all they needed to do was go to that log and put 3 letters, sub, in front of orbital, and for this December 7th launch, even though there were others that were clearly orbital and don't have an outcome. All they have to think about it. How could you cover this? Not put your other hat on. How could you cover this up if you're sitting in the control room with Dr. Condon and Vandenberg or whoever else, and they said, well, we can't tell the public this was a Mark II. It was going to hit Pittsburgh with a radioactive generator. What do? You will get Blue Book. Well, just say it was suborbital. When they look it up 25 years from now, people are going to say, look, suborbital, couldn't be it. I question the truth of any log that says the 7th launch was suborbital. But also there are plenty of other orbital launches that took place prior to the December 9th date. So even if it wasn't the 7th, it could be a different one. Matter of fact, there's one out there right now. The orbital launches came down between 2 days and 2 years. That was almost all of them. There's actually one that they say is still out there 50 years later that was launched back then. And a number of those don't have outcomes that they do say came down 2 days, 3 days, 6 months later. So, but I look at it, it's funny, Stan, is that, you and I do UFO investigations. And we're always fighting the CIA, Blue Book, the cover-ups and everything. This one time in my life that I've written an article with Owen where I'm kind of on the other side now as a debunker, even though that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to put out a plausible explanation. I see the UFO community taking the same stance as the debunker. You know, they believe the Air Force information, yet when everything else about the story the Air Force told us is not true. It wasn't a meteor. They had more than 3 people. They redact all of the information. They deny everything, but yet we're going to believe the logs that they submitted 25 years later. So it's almost like a reversal of position here, where I'm getting it now the way I used to dish it out, with the ufologists. But we're believing the Air Force information when that is all they needed to do to cover this up was say it was suborbital, as far as the December 7th, because that one clearly says it was didn't list an outcome other than the camera capsule going into the ocean.
Well, again, as Martin had mentioned from his source in the aerospace community, there is a number of other ones out there who have a lot of very detailed investigation research are doing on the Mark II, and I know we don't have time to get into it all, but they have some very interesting data which suggests that that is not what came down in Kecksburg. But I have another question for you, getting back to some of what you described. From your report in this, you're talking about, and I'm just going to part of the paragraph here, it talks about the trajectory control system to change the leading edge of the vehicle, thereby changing steering path of the vehicle. The vehicle then, in effect, can rise or fall or turn left or right. This in-flight capability was demonstrated by the object seen by many observers, and during the final moments of the event, when the re-entry vehicle landed in Kecksburg, an eyewitness, she remarked about seeing a 4-star object. The 4-star reference most likely was the 4 control jets used to steer the vehicle while in orbit and possibly used to change the descent speed. So my question is, John, when did you or Owen actually interview that eyewitness?
No, that's information that's out there, Frances Kalp. She was the first person that called it into the radio station. I think it was John Murphy's station or one of the other radio stations. She described it as a 4-pointed star. And the only reason we mentioned that was because she said it was a 4-pointed star. Those control jets were used in orbit out of space. They would have done probably nothing in low Earth atmosphere. But since she said there was a 4-pointed star, we know there were 4 control jets on this thing. So, but it really makes nothing about anything, because it wouldn't have. They may have been on, and that's what she saw. And I'm just trying to answer the Frances Kalp description, just like people said it glowed green, and that's why we explained that it had a copper alloy heat shield on it. That's the only reason we mentioned the 4-pointed star. If she had never said it was a 4-pointed star, because I think she's the only one maybe that said that, then we wouldn't have mentioned the 4 jets on it. But those jets were used in upper atmosphere orbit where it can control it. They controlled it on the way down by shifting the weight, as I had what we had explained.
Okay, well, first of all, John, it's very apparent in your report and the information you're having that a lot of the information you're describing came from my original investigation and articles. I interviewed that witness numerous times, but she, in fact, was not a witness to the object coming down. It was her young son. Her young son and his sister were out riding their bicycle that afternoon. Only he saw the fireball coming down in the distance, down in the woods. He ran home to tell his mother about it, and she contacted a neighbor, told her what happened. The kids decide they're going to run towards the woods to see what it was, and then the mother decides that it might be dangerous after talking to the neighbor and runs after the kids and stops them before they get anywhere near the site. But she, as well as others, saw after the object had fallen a column of blue smoke rising up out of the woods that dissipated very quickly. Now, I'm not for sure what she saw, but what she drew for me and what she described, she said was a 4-pointed star. It was above the smoke. So she was not an eyewitness seeing the thing falling from the sky to the ground.
Okay. Well, we said in the article that every single thing in that article can be found on the Internet, can be Googled. If you Google her, that's the information that's going to come up. But when she called it into the radio station, she said a 4-pointed star. Even if
No, she didn't.
Well,
she called in. John Murphy was doing the evening news, the 6:30 news at WHJB Radio in Greensburg, and she called in to report to them because they were broadcasting about the sighting of the object. She called in to tell them that whatever that thing was that apparently fell not far from where they lived over in Kecksburg, John took all her information. He contacted the State Police Barracks at Greensburg, passed that on to them, and then he went out to Kecksburg himself. And there's one other thing that I'd like to ask you about, because you told me that you felt that this was a clincher for you, that the sketch that Jerry Betters, an eyewitness, drew of the object on the military flatbed tractor trailer looked so much like the Mark II reentry vehicle that you felt that was very important. So I wanted to know, when did you or Owen interview Jerry Betters personally?
Well, we didn't, because he died in 2007. But what's out there, the point we're making, is that this is, as far as I know, the only notarized statement that was made, this drawing. And when you look at the shape of it, it's exactly the same shape as the GE Mark II. It's exactly the same shape. So it's just a simple comparison of this being the notarized statement at the time and what this looks like. They look exactly the same. It wasn't more of a bullet shape. It wasn't Cosmos 96 that was maybe 6 feet wide and 12, 15 feet long. His drawing is exactly the same shape as the Mark II.
All right, so
when you look at the two, when you look at the two side by side, I think every party would look and say, "Wow, it's the same shape."
Okay. Well, I did many interviews as well as some of my investigators with Jerry Betters. Can you tell me where Jerry Betters was positioned in relation to the military flatbed tractor trailer where he saw the object on it?
I don't remember all the details as far as where he was.
Okay, well, it's important detail.
I don't know if it was on the road. I don't know exactly where, but get it.
Jerry Betters and his friends were in a car. They were on the dirt lane, the dirt road. They were coming up on the road, and there were some soldiers and other people on that roadway, and he and them noticed way down through the field, way down over the hill, there's this large military flatbed tractor trailer truck in the distance, and he said that he saw and he described this in detail, what this thing looked like, the best that he could recall, best he could see from that distance, and there was a tarp over it, but the tarp was not completely covered for some reason. It was somewhat open, which gave him a view of the object. So Jerry's description is interesting, and he confirms what other people saw, but he was much further away to give any great detail. And unfortunately, Jerry, like myself, didn't have a lot of great artistic ability, and Jerry was trying to draw kind of the acorn shape with a raised-up back with the symbols on it that he saw, but the drawing he has looks somewhat similar to the GE product, but he could only do it to the best of his ability to try to give an idea of what he observed.
Yeah, and that's the problem with a lot of the witness testimony. If you just look at what people describe, like I said, Ernie Hoffman said it was small. It was the size of 2 suitcases. Other people you're saying says it's 10, 12 feet tall. That's the problem with human perception, and it's nighttime. So, and I'm sure also Jerry Betters wasn't an aerospace person and wasn't familiar with what Mark IIs look like, because they were secret at the time. But in a courtroom, you would take this notarized deposition, put it out, take a picture of the Mark II, put it out, and show it to the jury, and they would look at it and say, "Wow, that's the same. It's very similar."
And I would also bet you that an attorney in that courtroom would hand the pencil to Jerry and tell him to try the object again, and I would bet you that he's going to show the fact that he's just not a very good artist like myself.
Yeah, well, the other thing, too, in July when you had the 50th anniversary, depending on when they asked Jerry to pencil that, I noticed clearly this past July that, these people are 75, 80 years old now. Their memories were not that great, because if you remember, I raised my hand and I said, "Wait a second, some of you said this thing glowed green. The cover of your DVD says it glowed green. Your DVD says it glows green." Now, one of them, they looked at me with, like and they didn't remember it glowing green. None of them, not one, even the people in your DVD who said it glowed green. So that's a problem with 50 years later and asking people to reconfirm things. I didn't want to pick on them, because I'm trained in interviews, interrogations. I was the head of security. I just backed away. If you remember, I left the conference after 2 questions because I didn't want to seem like I was picking on the witnesses.
Well, John, I can tell you, there are many witnesses you're not aware of, but also if you looked at that video again, and I will agree with you, yes, that's why I recorded a lot of this data 30, 40 years ago, because many witnesses were already in age at that time, and now a lot of them are 80, 90, many are deceased, and yes, unfortunately, they're beginning to forget and get certain details confused. But even Randy Overly, that's on my video, he was in Norvelt several miles before the object fell. He watched this object as it approached him in the distance. It passed no more about 200 feet overhead. He gave a good description of this object, that he saw the object within the flames. He did see green flames, but he saw other color flames as well. And other people, many who you're not aware of, also described seeing this. And, of course, after the object fell, it was mainly like a blue arcing that was reported down in the woods by different people.
Yeah, I mean, that is the same as what Owen saw it over in Shafton, and he described it just like he said this Overly guy described it, glowing green, but other colors coming off of it. But that's why I would say your 1998 DVD, because it was done in 98 and not in 2015, like the 50th anniversary, that testimony is better than what you're going to get right now. And that's why I was a little disappointed, actually, in July, because some of the things they said in your DVD they weren't saying now. And I attribute that to just memory, because most of these people are around 80 years old.
And I agree 100%, and that's why I documented this years and years ago to keep it for historical sake, what they told me back then.
Absolutely. I mean, and I watched your DVD a couple of times, and, but even on that DVD, you see different descriptions. Ernie Hoffman saying it was small, the size of 2 suitcases. Other people saying it was, so nighttime, human perception, who knows? But, the bottom line with this is we know the military lied. They lied about just about every aspect of it they lied about. So, we need somebody to come forward. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't a Mark II, but it was a Mark 8. Maybe it was some other program that they were working on. We've discussed the Nazi Bell, right? We know that those records were there in 1945. This is 20 years later. I don't know. Could it have been? But the question I have is, we know aerodynamically to come down the way it did, it pretty much has to be the same height and width. 6 feet by 6 feet, 8 feet by 8 feet. That's the only way it could maneuver based on what happened that day. It couldn't be Cosmos 96 because that would have tumbled and burned up and fall apart like it did over Canada. So the Nazi Bell was it wasn't wide enough at the base. It was more of a barrel-shaped, the Nazi Bell, But we don't know that the Nazi, you and I have talked about this, we don't know that it's ever been put into use. But my question would be, too, with the Nazi Bell, it was meant to be a time distortion weapon. So why would it be miles up in space?
I mean,
it doesn't make any sense. The Cosmos 96 and the Nazi Bell don't make any sense.
There have been many. When your report came out, really, it wasn't anything really new to me, because for years and years, many people have come to me telling me that they knew the origin of what the object was, and they were all different. I mean, it went from originally hearing from a family at Kecksburg, an Air Force officer interviewed, told them a Gemini capsule was expelled in the area. Of course, that was not the case. Another one was a guy said he knew for sure it was a Soviet ICBM that went out of control. It goes on and on and on, but the point is, while there may be some similarities to what was seen, there's no evidence in any of these theories that they have any definitive connection to the Kecksburg incident.
Well, it's not proven. It's a theory. And, as we published the paper I sent you months ago, I've added to it. Now it's a little bit different, et cetera. Even the one that was in the MUFON Journal, we've added to and it's developed. But it's a theory. Yes, we don't have a definitive yes, that this is it, because that would have to come from really the Air Force, because it wasn't a NASA project. And I even say, Leslie Kean and the Sci-Fi Channel, they sued NASA. NASA claims they turned everything over but lost the main box of evidence. So what are they going to do? Even if there was the Mark II, is a NASA spokesman going to come forward and say, yeah, that's right, Ventre got it right. We knew all along that's what it was. Oh, you did. So then you lied to the federal court and didn't say that, whatever that was 10 years ago in the lawsuit. They're not going to confirm it. They're not going to confirm or deny, because at this point they can't. So we need somebody that was there on the scene as a military person.
Right.
Okay, hang on just 1 second, please. We're right at the top of the hour, and this is where I'm going to break the show, but I'm not going to run music, and I'm just going to say that you can keep talking here. That's fine for a little while longer if you'd like, but the main thing is there were two people that tried to call in. If you're still listening live, feel free to call in with your questions. And that's 603-967-4030. It sounds, the way this is going, that perhaps there is a middle ground. John, you seem open to the idea that this doesn't have to be a case closed. It could be just more of a possibility.
We threw it as a theory, obviously. We don't have 100% on this, and we concluded our article saying we need somebody to come forward to confirm it. But like I said, it's not going to be NASA or the Air Force. It's got to be somebody that was there. But I think we can knock out really all the explanations other than it was a UFO or some type of military man-made project, and the only one we know of that isn't secret, was secret for 25 years, was this Mark II. It really, really matches up in a lot of ways.
John, there's one other thing that I remembered that Owen mentioned. He thought that the object was taken and just buried somewhere. And Stan, I heard you say that some people saw it actually drive into a hangar, and then there was a shoot-to-kill ordinance and all that.
Oh, yeah. That's very well documented, because we have a number of people, including a fairly new witness I've been working with the last several weeks, which is a military source. But anyhow, there's no doubt that the object went out around 1 o'clock in the morning. And, John mentioned again earlier about Ernie Hoffman. Again, I want to point out, we have good confirmation there were two military flatbed tractor trailer trucks at the scene. The one with the longer, lower cargo on that likely Ernie saw went out earlier that evening, went to the air base in Pittsburgh. The object went out around 1 o'clock in the morning. It was taken with a small convoy. They went into Lockbourne Air Force Base. I interviewed one of the Air Force security police who was involved with the security team. He didn't know, but another witness also confirmed that story to me. Now I have another person give me good information confirming the story as well. He said he didn't stay on the team that long. He heard it continued on to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and then later other witnesses confirmed to me exactly what building they took to at Wright-Patterson. It was not Hangar 18. It was another warehouse building.
I'm sure they took it somewhere, even if, if it was the Mark II or it was a UFO or whatever it was, they obviously took it to an Air Force base. The one thing we do know for certainty that both you and I will agree on that point, but we'll agree on is it couldn't be a meteor, because they wouldn't have shown up in force to take a meteor out. And show me one other meteor that they did this same scenario for under Project Moondust, but yet that is the official government explanation. It was a meteor. So how can we believe anything that they say about this case or any other that was unexplained?
John, if this was the GE Mark II, how could this thing come down through the trees, knock the trees over, come down, make what some people said looked like almost a belly landing, like a soft landing, without any parachutes? And, of course, there was no major crater at the scene reported. And it was completely packed.
It came down bottom first, and it would have skidded along the ground and crashed through the trees. I think it very well could do exactly that, and then it laid on its side when it came down.
I can tell you there's a number of people out there in the aerospace field who is looking at a lot of data on the GE Mark II, and they disagree with what you're saying.
All right. Well, I mean, like I said, we need somebody, and we've never had anybody that was actually a military person there on the scene or in a control room come forward and tell the truth like in a lot of other cases. But this is a theory, and, you know, if it's not, like I think I've said on a lot of shows, I'm 95% convinced, I'm 98% convinced, could it be this? I think it is. And could it be a UFO? It could be. Could it be some other project? It could be. But this is one that was kept quiet till 1991. And you had to actually find these documents in textbooks and different places, which Owen did do. So, I think we're down to two theories on this. I really do. And I think people have to just look at the pictures, look at it, and say, well, okay, it could be this one. Or, no, I believe it was the UFO because somebody else said they saw a hand come out of it or whatever at the hangar. So, I think it's down to those two, and that's it.
And we're down to the two theories I talked about years and years ago. We're still in the same position that some object of still undetermined origin fell at Kecksburg in 1965.
Well, there you have it for the first part of the show. We continue this talk through another 5 or 10 minutes, maybe a little bit longer than that. If you want to listen to hour 2, all you have to do is become a supporter. And you're running out of time for the $1 per month membership that changes to $2 per month starting January 1st. Remember, you can always listen to the whole show live for free right on podcastufo.com. We have a new live player and hope you check that out. Plus, you can also interact with the guests through the chat room or make a phone call and speak to them directly. So that's it. I wish everyone out there happy holidays. If you celebrate Christmas, have a Merry Christmas. And we'll be back next week with Jan Harzan. He's the MUFON director, and he'll be on next week for the full 2 hours. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll be talking to you next week. Remember to keep your eyes to the sky.